My name is Adwa Menima. I was born near Kumasi in Ghana, and for many years I served in a secret spiritual society that operated through shrines, covenants, and altars. Some people may not believe what I am about to share, and that is their choice. But I know what I saw. I know the assignments I participated in. I know the people we monitored, and I know what happened when one ordinary school teacher decided that for 30 days he would wage war against the altars tormenting his family. Before I tell you his story, there is something I want you to pay attention to. Many people pray against evil altars without first understanding why they are praying. They hear somebody say, "Destroy the altars," and immediately begin warfare. But in most cases, something happens first. Certain signs begin appearing. Certain patterns emerge. Certain dreams repeat themselves. And that is exactly how Kofi's story began. So if some of the things I mentioned sound familiar, listen carefully to this confession until the end. It may help you understand battles you have never been able to explain. And if you know someone constantly facing strange setbacks and recurring spiritual attacks, this is the kind of testimony worth sharing, because many people do not even realize what they are fighting. The first time Kofi came to our attention, he was not praying, he was not fasting, he was not attending deliverance services. He was simply suffering, quietly, confused, exhausted, and slowly losing hope. At the time, Kofi Ayman was a mathematics teacher living in Agisu. People respected him. He worked hard. He avoided trouble. Yet his life seemed trapped inside an invisible cage. Nothing moved forward. Nothing stayed successful. Nothing lasted. Every opportunity somehow collapsed. At first he thought it was bad luck. Then he thought it was coincidence. But eventually, even he began noticing patterns. The first sign appeared through dreams. Not once, not twice, for years. Kofi would dream of returning to an old village compound he had not visited since childhood. In the dream, elderly people sat around large clay pots. They would smile, call him by name, offer him food, sometimes fufu, sometimes rice, sometimes soup, and every time he ate, something terrible happened afterward. A contract would fail, money would disappear, a relationship would collapse, unexpected sickness would arise. The pattern became so consistent that even Kofi started fearing sleep. Inside our group, we understood those dreams differently. When reports reached us, one of the senior women laughed. She said he still attends the meetings. I did not understand, she explained. The food means he is still participating. That statement confused me. How could a man participate in something while sleeping in his own house? Years later, after leaving darkness, I understood that many spiritual traditions interpret recurring dreams as symbolic messages rather than literal events. But at the time our group believed those dreams represented a continuing connection to ancestral agreements. Whether one agrees with that interpretation or not, Kofi certainly believed something was wrong, because the pattern never stopped. Then came the second sign. Every time he approached a major breakthrough, disaster followed. In 2013, he nearly secured a promotion. The process collapsed. In 2014, he entered a promising business partnership. His partner vanished with the investment. In 2015, he became engaged. 3 months later, the relationship ended unexpectedly. In 2016, another opportunity emerged. The company closed before he could even start. Every door opened, then closed, opened, then closed, opened, then closed. But the third sign disturbed him the most. Several relatives were experiencing similar struggles. Different people, different locations, the same pattern, repeated disappointments, broken marriages, chronic financial hardship, strange dreams involving old family compounds, unexpected setbacks after periods of progress. Kofi began asking questions nobody wanted to answer. One evening, while visiting an elderly relative, he heard something that changed everything. The old man looked at him and said, "There are problems in this family that did not begin with your generation." Kofi asked what he meant. The old man refused to explain. Instead, he simply said, "Some battles are older than the people fighting them." Those words stayed in Kofi's mind. Around that same period, another disturbing dream occurred. This dream was different. He found himself standing before a light structure resembling an altar. Several figures surrounded it. His name was written on an object resting upon it. As he approached, one of the figures warned him, "Leave this place. You belong here." Kofi woke up terrified. He later told a pastor about the dream. The pastor listened carefully. Then he asked a question. "What if God is showing you something that requires prayer? Now pay attention." This is where the story truly begins. Because Kofi did not immediately start fasting. He did not immediately start midnight warfare. First, he spent days studying scripture, looking for answers, looking for examples, looking for patterns, looking for understanding. During that search, he discovered the story of Gideon in Judges chapter 6, specifically verses 25 to 32. The passage where Gideon destroys the altar of Baal. Kofi read it repeatedly, again and again and again. One sentence captured his attention. God did not tell Gideon to negotiate with the altar. God did not tell Gideon to tolerate the altar. God told Gideon to tear it down. That idea gripped him. Then he moved to Psalm 35, the psalm where David cries, "Contend, Lord, with those who contend with me." Every night he read it. Every night he highlighted verses. Every night he prayed through it. Finally he settled on Psalm 91, not as a weapon of attack, but as a shield of protection, because he knew that if he entered serious warfare, he would need protection. Years later, he told people, "Psalm 35 was my battle cry. Psalm 91 was my covering." Then he made a decision, a radical decision, a decision that immediately attracted our attention. For 30 days he would engage in what he called a night fast, because his teaching schedule made daytime fasting difficult. He would begin every evening at 6 p.m. and continue until 6 a.m. for 30 consecutive days. No excuses, no interruptions, no breaks. His routine never changed. 6 o'clock p.m., prayer, scripture reading, worship, midnight, Psalm 35, Judges chapter 6, Psalm 91, specific prayers against every altar connected to his life and family. Then more prayer until dawn, every night, 30 days. He fasted from 6 p.m. in the evening to 6 o'clock a.m. in the morning, because of his daytime routine. The first week seemed uneventful, at least from his perspective. But from our side, something unusual began happening. Assignments directed toward him started failing. Nothing dramatic, just unusual resistance. Operations that normally succeeded suddenly encountered obstacles. Messages became unclear. Results became inconsistent. Senior members noticed. Questions were asked. Investigations began. By the 7th night, Kofi reported another dream. This time, he saw chains breaking one after another. The dream lasted only moments, but it encouraged him. So he continued night after night, without stopping, without surrendering, without changing the pattern. Inside our group, concern was growing. Not because we feared Kofi, at least not yet. We have seen people pray before. We have seen people fast before. Most gave up. Most became tired. Most stopped after a few days. But Kofi continued. And consistency is what worried us. Because altars really fear enthusiasm. They fear persistence. Then something happened that none of us expected. The sacrifices we presented at the group stopped producing expected results. Divinations became unreliable. Messages became distorted. Senior members started arguing. Confusion appeared where certainty once existed, and for the first time, Antifa herself looked troubled. Very troubled. One evening she summoned everyone. The atmosphere felt tense. Nobody spoke. Nobody smiled. Finally she broke the silence. Then she said words I had never heard before from her. "There is pressure on the altar." The entire gathering froze, because in all my years inside that coven, nobody had ever spoken those words. Not once. Not ever. And what happened next will shake not only our coven, but several other connected altars across the region. When Antifa stood before us and said there is pressure on the altar, a cold silence filled the gathering. I had served in that circle for years. I have seen people pray. I have seen pastors conduct crusades. I have seen believers organize fasting programs. But I had never heard one of our senior leaders admit that an altar was under pressure. Never. Because in our world, altars were considered sources of strength. They were the places where spiritual agreements were reinforced, the places where assignments were authorized, the places where certain members believed they drew confidence and influence. To hear that one of those altars was under pressure was deeply unsettling to everyone present. Nobody laughed. Nobody challenged her, because everyone had already begun noticing unusual disruptions. At that point, Kofi was entering the second week of his 30-day warfare. His routine remained unchanged. Every evening at 6 p.m., he began his fast. After work, he would return home, wash, spend time worshiping, and prepare himself for prayer. At midnight, he would open his Bible. Psalm 35, Judges chapter 6, Psalm 91, night after night. The same pattern, the same discipline, the same determination. One thing many people misunderstand is this. The greatest challenge in spiritual warfare is often consistency. Almost anyone can pray intensely for one night. Many can pray for 3 days. Some can pray for a week, but 30 consecutive days of focused prayer and fasting require commitment. That was what made Kofi different, my friends. He was not looking for excitement. He was looking for breakthrough. Around the 12th day, reports began arriving from locations outside our immediate area. At first, we thought the reports were unrelated. Then we realized they were connected. A shrine operator from another community complained that certain spiritual consultations were becoming unusually difficult. Another group reported recurring confusion during their meetings. Elsewhere, people claimed they were experiencing disturbing dreams involving damaged altars and abandoned shrines. The reports kept coming. Inside our network, there was a saying, when one altar shakes, connected altars listen. That was exactly what seemed to be happening. Word was spreading. Something unusual was occurring. Meanwhile, Kofi began noticing changes in his own life. The dreams about eating mysterious food became less frequent. The recurring dreams about the old compound began fading. Instead, he started having different dreams. Dreams where he was walking through gates that had previously been locked. Dreams where ropes were falling away. Dreams where obstacles were being removed from roads ahead of him. Those dreams encouraged him, so he continued. Then came the night that changed everything. It was the 18th day of his fast, and it was the 18th day that our altar experienced what many members later described as fire. Let me explain carefully. I am not speaking about physical flames consuming trees or buildings. I am describing what members believed they were experiencing spiritually. Several individuals reported sensations of overwhelming heat during a gathering. Others claimed they saw intense light surrounding the altar area. Some became frightened and abruptly left. Whatever was happening, the confidence that normally filled our meetings disappeared. Fear replaced it. That night, one elderly woman collapsed to her knees. She began crying uncontrollably. People rushed toward her. When she finally spoke, her words shocked everyone. She said, "The altar is losing strength. The altar is losing strength." Nobody wanted to hear that, but many secretly feared she was right. By the third week, panic had begun spreading. Assignments that previously seemed straightforward were being abandoned. People started blaming one another. Long-standing alliances broke apart. Meetings became shorter. Attendance declined. Some members stopped coming entirely. The atmosphere was changing. At the same time, Kofi remained focused. One evening, after reading Judges chapter 6, he reportedly noticed something he had overlooked before. Gideon destroyed the altar at night, not because he was afraid, but because obedience required action. Kofi later said that realization changed how he prayed. Instead of praying generally, he began praying specifically. He prayed against recurring family patterns. He prayed against fear. He prayed against every cycle of failure that had followed his family for generations. He prayed against every recurring attack. He prayed against every recurring setback, every recurring disappointment, every recurring limitation, one by one, specifically. That specificity seemed to make a difference, because during the fourth week, breakthroughs began appearing unexpectedly. His younger sister received employment after months of rejection. A debt issue that had lingered for years suddenly moved toward resolution. A relative, experiencing chronic conflict within the family, reported a surprising reconciliation. Small victories, but meaningful victories, enough to encourage him to continue. Then came day 27. That was the day news reached what we considered the main regional gathering. I was present when the message arrived. The messenger looked exhausted, disturbed, concerned. He reported that several connected groups had experienced similar disruptions: confusion, fear, declining confidence, unexpected setbacks, members abandoning activities. The room fell silent, because it was no longer possible to dismiss what was happening as coincidence. Too many reports were arriving from too many places. 3 nights later, Kofi entered the final stretch. Day 28, Day 29, Day 30. His prayers intensified, not because he was angry, but because he sensed he was close to completing what he had started. He sensed he was close to completing what he had started. On the final night he remained awake until dawn. He worshipped. He prayed. He read Psalm 35 aloud, then Psalm 91, then portions of Judges chapter 6, again and again until sunrise. That same night, our gathering dissolved into confusion. Arguments erupted. People accused one another. Several members left before the meeting ended. The unity that once held everything together seemed shattered. The confidence people had relied upon was gone. Many interpreted that collapse as evidence that the altar's influence had been broken. Whether one sees it spiritually, psychologically, or both, the effect was undeniable. The group never fully recovered. For me, that was the beginning of a personal crisis. I had spent years believing those systems were invincible, years believing those structures could never be challenged. Yet, I had just watched fear spread through people who once appeared fearless. I had watched confidence disappear. I had watched confusion replace certainty, and I could not ignore what I had witnessed. Months later I left that life, not because of one event, but because the questions had become impossible to silence. Questions about truth, questions about faith, questions about power, questions about God, questions that eventually led me in a different direction. As for Kofi, his story did not end with the 30-day fast. Life was still life. Challenges still existed, but the cycles that had tormented him for years began breaking. The fear that had dominated him disappeared. The recurring dreams faded. His confidence returned. And perhaps most importantly, he no longer felt trapped. Before I end this confession, I want to leave you with something important. Many people immediately look for dramatic manifestations. They want instant results, instant answers, instant victories. But Kofi's breakthrough did not come through one emotional night. It came through 30 days of disciplined prayer, 30 days of scripture, 30 days of fasting, 30 days of refusing to quit. That was the difference. And if you are listening to this confession and you recognize some of the patterns described earlier, persistent cycles of failure, recurring troubling dreams, repeated setbacks occurring at critical moments, or struggles that seem to repeat across generations, then perhaps this testimony has given you a place to begin your prayers and your search for understanding, not with fear, but with faith, not with panic, but with persistence. Because sometimes the battle changes when a person decides they will no longer ignore the patterns. My name is Adwa Menima. I once served in darkness. Today, I share these experiences so others can understand what I witnessed. And this is one story I will never forget.